It's a prescription. It's a manufactured drug that needs stick engines. It's safe to take. Obviously, that's not the case, but that's how they get started. They get it from their friends. They have parties, they put the pills on the table, and they'll have a pill play. It sounds like something out of Dragnet, but it still occurs to this day. So they do that, and like Mr. Suozzi was mentioning before, it's not just, what'd you say? It's not any one component of society. We're all, we all know people. He mentioned that he has friends, children who fell into this downward spiral, and it's very addictive. They think, you know, we all remember what it's like to be a teenager. You think you're invincible, you think you can try things, stop whenever you want, but like you said, it could be cigarettes, it could be alcohol, it could be anything. Before you know it, you could very well be hooked. And it's endemic to this county in particular. Interestingly, it's not as widespread in other parts of the country. The Northeast has a lot of it. You know, you go out west, it's methadone and methamphetamines, meth. They call it meth. But
crystal meth.
yep. So they start, they try to go into the medicine cabinet, they get it from their friends. Before they know it, they're hooked. So it's crucial to be vigilant as parents, to really be in your kids' business for everything, but particularly in this area, because it's very subtle. You know, maybe it'll take one pill, maybe next week it'll be another pill, and before you know it, they're taking a lot of pills. What happens next? And these are the things that you can notice more easily. They start to steal. They start stealing at lower levels. They walk up and down the streets at night, trying doorknobs to see if anybody left their car door open, and they'll steal the money. They'll steal whatever they can fence. Then they work it up and they start stealing from their friends. Before long, they have no friends except other junkies, and they steal from all their friends. So they lose their friends. They lose their support network. Then they start stealing from their families, and that goes on for a long time because families are a lot more forgiving than friends. So that goes on for a while. Finally, the families can't. They turn the kid off, so they can't take this anymore. Move out. You know, go to a clinic. So what happens with the clinics and the social work, we'll discuss this further, but for some people, they go for 10 days, sometimes they go for 30 days, some detox areas, they go for a year. And it's just, I never cease to be amazed how they do have an effectiveness rate, but there is a recidivism rate, which is just staggering. And one time I arrested a guy for a burglary, and he was in jail for 7 years, came out, and he went on a burglary spree in order to get money, in order to buy heroin. And I said to him, you've been without drugs, you've been in jail for 7 years, you didn't have any, you can live without it. Why would you do this when you know it's only a matter of time before you're going to get arrested again, and you're going to go to jail for even longer? He said, I don't know, it's just like that. It's just, yeah, as soon as you can get it, you want to have it. And I think there's, not too long ago, Philip Seymour Hoffman, clean and sober for 14, 15 years, something like that. And he decided to go back to heroin. You know, he's a guy, one of the best actors of our generation. Why do you do that? And he overdosed. And with respect to overdoses, it's more prevalent now probably than ever, not just because of how many people are doing it, but because they're lacing the drugs with, and I call phenytoin, or anything else that can get people hooked. So they may start off on what's in your medicine cabinet with a painkiller, and why do they shift to heroin? Because no kid grows up saying, I want to be a junkie, but they get hooked on these low-level pain pills, And then they switched to heroin because it's cheap. You can get a dose for $5. A pill could cost you $20, $50. So heroin's cheaper. It could be consumed in a variety of ways. You know, we always think of it as injections, but it could be consumed through the mouth, and you know, it can shoot up. And like I said, it's just a downward spiral. Police department does the best it can, if they can. So far this year, in Nassau County, through today, there have been 653 arrests for heroin and its derivatives. And last year there was 709 arrests. So we're on a pace to exceed last year's. And the overdoses are increasing also. So, like Mr. Suozzi was referring to before, the answer isn't purely arresting drug dealers. The answer is get involved with these kids at an early age, and you gotta just really get it into them. They have to stay away from this stuff for the course. Personally, I think that long term, it's going to have a lifespan like crack. Although crack is around, when it first started, they were okay. And now, you know, the next generation or the next cohort of children saw what happened to crackheads, and they said, I'm not going to try crack, I'll never do that. But we haven't lived through a heroin epidemic probably since the 60s or 70s. So it's an open. I think over the long term it's going to run its life course. But that's not the answer to the problem. We still have a lot of work to do. We have to address it head on to try to ameliorate anybody else dying. Any of these kids die, like I say, not good kids. They just get lost their way.
All right, Pete. Thank you very much. Appreciate it very much. And again, we're going to try and think about, we're trying to lay out the problem, but then we want to think about what needs to be done to actually address the problem. Because, what we're doing now is good, and it's important. Law enforcement is good, and mental health is good, and social work and drug treatment is good, but it's not working. There's got to be something as far as the policy shift has to go on. Go ahead.
So I'm going to get into some of the policy shifts. But I also want to talk about what happened last year across Rhode Island. The state actually produced a report that was statewide to look at overdoses and lined up all the counties, including the 5 boroughs. And number 1 on top of that list was our neighbor in Suffolk County. Number 2 on that list in terms of fatal overdoses was the Bronx. Number 3 was Staten Island, and number 4 was Nassau County. And between both counties, we lost more than 400 young people to preventable overdoses. And think about it for a second. There's 1 per day. So 50 people in this room. So within a month or so, we'll lose the number of people in this room. If it's 1 per day, it means that by this time tomorrow, some family in Nassau and Suffolk, typically more than 1 family, will wake up, will go about their day like you and I did. And by the end of the day, we'll be making funeral plans for that kid. They will have walked along the road with that kid, a road that included some of the behaviors that you heard from the detective. They'll feel terribly conflicted because they'll feel a sense of relief. But they'll also feel a pain that will never, ever, ever disappear. Their lives forever will be changed. Those parents will think back to the day when they tried to wake up their kid and he just wouldn't wake up. They'll think about the EMTs rushing through the door with gurneys and knocking the furniture out of the way and trying to save them. They'll think about their repeated trips to treatment. And they'll think about what was a living hell, usually that lasts between 18 months and 2 years before there's a fatality. And whereas if that child had died of cancer or some other disease, they tell their neighbors and people would make casseroles and rally around them. These families don't do this. They're suffering silence, as they have for a really long time. And some of them will lie about the cause of death. Some of them will call it a private matter. But it will be yet another casualty for a disease that is preventable at the outset. but also highly treatable. You know, 21 years ago, the New York Times ran a front page story about heroin in suburbia. And it was catchy because they profiled a young cheerleader from Garden City. And it broke all the stereotypes of what a heroin user is. There's no longer the guy stumbling around the Lower East Side with a needle hanging out of his arm. Somebody from Garden City. And in the past 21 years, the death rates and the arrests have continued to mount. Because just as addiction gets worse if it's not treated in the individual, it gets worse in communities as well. And there's a whole bunch of reasons that we didn't jump up and respond the way we should have. Part of it is it's one of those things that makes people really, really uncomfortable when we talk about substance use. Because there's still a stigma. People still hide. And there's some key things that as we go through this crisis, that we need to take a hard look at. This is a disease that's wiping out young people between the ages of 18 to 25. It's demolishing families. It's destroying our economy. The costs associated with this are huge. Before we even get into the costs associated with policing, and courts, and incarceration, how about the lost productivity as mom and dad spend their entire day surfing the internet looking for treatment? How about the cost to a school when a kid passes away and the entire school day is lost because the grief counselors can't keep up with the demand for help from the kids? So it's had a huge impact. And one of the things that we've seen is that this crisis, just as Sandy did for our region, you think about it, Sandy put a giant microscope on just how unprepared we were as individuals. God knows I wasn't ready as an individual, but as a community. And in the wake of Sandy, we looked and said, so what do we need to do differently so that we're better prepared the next time around? Our hope is that's what happens with this. Because in looking at the spotlight here, we haven't done a good job across a whole variety of areas. Number one, prevention education. Right? A lot of what's happening is completely preventable. But that means we have to get serious about educating kids in schools. The way we do it now, this day, is we take 1,000 kids, we pack them into an auditorium when they're 14 or 15. They bring in a guy like me to scare them in 45 minutes, and that's drug education. Especially in an environment where Common Core rules the day. Because school districts will say, we just don't have time to do everything we want to do. So we put more pressure on kids, more than ever before. You better do well on those tests. And at the same time, we've taken away the support. We wonder why they turn to drugs and alcohol. Education should run K to 12. I have a 5-year-old. He knows exactly what I do for a living. I don't talk to him about heroin and safer injections. But I do talk to him about how medicine is when you're sick. I do talk to him about alcohol when it's consumed in our house. Age-appropriate education that's based on evidence is really, really critical. Less than 20% of the school districts on Long Island are doing this the way they should be, and it's a huge missed opportunity. They're also missing an opportunity when it comes to parents. The number one question I get from parents is, how do I talk to my kids about this? And what do I say when they ask me if I did? That's the number one thing that holds parents back from having a conversation. If they ask me if I smoke pot, what do I say? There's a really easy answer for that. I could walk you through it in about 3 minutes. But there aren't a lot of avenues for parents to get that information and to learn about what's going on. Everyone knows there's a crisis, but nobody knows what to do about it. Moving on from prevention, we typically look at treatment. Right? Our organization runs a treatment facility right up the road. When we look at the relapse rates among young people, that is how many go back to using substances, the number is 85% after treatment. It's not because treatment's bad, because they spend 2 to 3 years using substances. We threw them into a treatment facility for 5 days. The insurance cut them off, they came back out, we threw them right back into the same polluted pond. It would be the same thing as if we told somebody, look, you have a cancer diagnosis. We think you need 10 rounds of chemo. After one, we throw them out the door and then blame them for having cancer. The insurance companies very often are willing to pay for ungodly amounts of painkillers when it comes to paying for treatment, have not done their fair share. Do you know who pays for all of that when they don't do their fair share? You, right? You pay for it in the Nassau County Jail. You pay for it in not being able to leave your car doors open. You pay for it in terms of people who are driving around impaired. You pay for it when they show up in the Newman emergency room, about $1,000 a day. When the insurance companies don't do their job, you pay for it. The state is taking some real aggressive action to deal with these insurance companies, but they're still doing their thing. And what happens is the insurance company will say, look, first time in treatment, doesn't matter if you're using 15 bags of heroin a day, which is now the norm. Doesn't matter if you're injecting, which is now the norm. We're only going to pay for outpatient treatment. And they need to fail outpatient treatment before we'll pay for an inpatient stay. Outpatient treatment is basically 45 minutes with the counselor once a week. We know that addiction can be treated in that way. We know more about addiction and more about brain science than we ever did before, yet the treatment world hasn't caught up with that. And so our approach to treatment is off. Additionally, we talk incessantly about heroin. This is not just about heroin. I see Xanax levels that I've never seen before. Right? Half the world thinks it's okay to be on Xanax. I see alcohol use among adolescents higher than it's ever been before. With the discussion about marijuana legalization, regardless of how you feel about it, the perception on the part of most young people and parents in an environment where we're talking about heroin is that it's only pot, it's not that serious. And for some people it's not, for others it is. If you're the 1 in 10 or the 2 in 10 that's predisposed to addiction, guess what? It's a real big deal. It's also a real big deal because the kid who sells your kid a dime bag understands that there's a lot more money to be made in a $40 Vicodin than there is a dime bag. And that $40 Vicodin will move over to heroin, although heroin is cheaper if you're shooting 15 times a day. It's $150 a day to happen. So we don't do well prevention, we don't do well treatment. The third area that we typically look at is recovery support. That is, how do we support young people in recovery? This is the only major metropolitan area in the entire United States that does not yet have a recovery center for young people to go to. We have no recovery schools. And my belief is that every school should be a recovery school. But we know that drugs and alcohol run rampant in all of our schools. Every single superintendent in Nassau County will tell you. We have no sober colleges. And so when these young people go off to treatment for 5 days, if they've been using for several years, and they come back out, not much out there to support them. Some are doing it, although we see huge relapse rates, and quite frankly, the overdose numbers get your attention faster than anything else. There's a whole lot of young people that are making it through, that do find a path to recovery. Last thing we have to do is find a better way to tell some of those stories. As I wrap up and we talk to our next speaker about mental health issues, I want to say 2 things. It used to be that the gap between the treatment world and the law enforcement world was real significant. I complained about all the money going to cops and jails and those kind of things, and you'll start the world probably blame us for all being too liberal and that kind of thing. I will tell you that one of the positive things to come out of this crisis is that we're all now working together. We're all talking about proactive solutions and things that we can do together. I actively encourage young people who know of dealers to report them to the police. And at the same time, I think the law enforcement world understands that we don't have enough jails to hold all the kids who are struggling with addiction. And a lot of those young people, as we talk about recovery, imagine you drink and drug your way through high school when you're 14 and 15. By the time you're 18, you have a low-level drug offense, you go to treatment, clean up the act. You're 20, you have a low-level drug offense and your skills aren't very good. Job development is a real major problem in this region. We don't have employers who are looking to hire these kids, so I promise these kids the bright new world of recovery, what the world is going to look like, And they're sitting in mom and dad's finished basement with no job prospects because they have a rap sheet. Gotta fix that. Last thing I'd say is the connection to mental health. I've talked exclusively about substance use disorders. Lisa's going to talk about mental health issues. Here's where it connects. If you ask any young person why they use substances, they will tell you, it doesn't help me to feel high, it simply helps me to feel normal. And young people who suffer from anxiety, depression, or any number of other things, whose parents sometimes are reluctant to have them stigmatized with a psychiatric diagnosis, turn to drugs and alcohol as a way of medicating those things away, and wind up trapped in a world that they never wanted. Did you have a question?
I wonder how many of those kids are coming from homes where parents are drug dependent.
You know, there's certainly a family component to this. What I would say is there's any number of things that contribute to your addiction. Parents play a role in this, but obviously not an exclusive role in this. And quite frankly, I've been to, probably in the past 2 years, 20 funerals and shiva calls. And there are parents that you objectively look and say, you did everything right. Your kid had a really serious disease that nobody can treat properly. But I do always talk to parents about modeling good behavior, right? If you're popping Xanax as you get on a plane, if you're drinking every night, you're sending a message to your kid for 15 years before you have the talk that this is the way you deal with a stressful day, this is the way you unwind, this is the way you relax. And so we do a lot of parent education seminars about how to model that behavior. It doesn't mean you can never drink, but it does mean you've got to unwind some of those messages as you go along.
Or the parent may have a chronic pain problem
Yes.
and is drug dependent.
Let's thank Jeff very much for